Yeah, done with my Oreo.
Okay, good.
Do we really know what happened? The brother did.
The brother, that's what I thought too.
I mean, that seems like kind of obvious.
Hey, do you want to talk about death?
Yeah. I mean,
Murdery thingy.
Ready. Here we go, ready.
Here we go.
Welcome to Mystery Murdery Thingy.
Mystery
Murdery
murdery
podcast where we talk
mystery
about
murdery,
things.
mystery murdery thingy. That's it. That's the new theme song.
That's the new hip jive on the street, y'all. Am I cool now?
Hip jive.
Is that what someone says is cool?
Excuse me. Were you invited to the cookout?
Yes.
Mario.
No. Do I get to go if I have a black girlfriend?
I don't know. That's not up to me.
Is that a question that I can put on Reddit?
I feel like if anybody's
is that a good
gonna
Ask
be,
Reddit question?
I feel like if anybody's gonna be in charge of the black people cookout, it'd be like Idris Elba or something.
Okay, I'll just tweet it.
Why don't you ask him?
Yeah, I'll inquire of Idris.
It'll
be cool.
The metaphorical cookout.
Right.
Anywho, welcome to Mystery Murdery Thingy. My name is Chloe.
My name is Mario.
I kind of hesitated, like I didn't know my name.
Yeah. What's my name? Oh yeah, that's right. So yeah, here we are in the podcasting tent fort thingy that we're trying out here. So yeah, hey, what's up? And let's get into it. So who's gonna go first this week? Who will it be?
Not gonna lie, I'm super excited about mine.
Yeah, go. You go first. Yeah, you've been talking about how excited you are for like 3 days, so you should probably go first.
All right. So, also, I didn't look up how to say any of these names.
That's okay.
So
just wait.
We're just gonna have to go with it. To one of the most populated countries in the world, India. I apologize.
Okay.
Okay. So, I've got a big ol' bribery scandal turned into people ending up dead type of story.
Okay.
So, and I know you're doing an assassination.
Right.
This isn't like assassination, but it is like high-ranking people and their family members showing up dead.
Oh.
So like I said, it started off as an unusually large bribery scandal until people start showing up dead. So, the Vyapam Scam is based on entrance examinations. So, India has this whole system where to get a good job, you got to pass a test.
Sure. They have this in different countries.
Right. So it's admissions and recruitment, this scam that was unearthed in the India's state of Madhya Pradesh in 2013. So Vyapam is actually the first few letters of 3 words, Vyapam Pariksha Mandal. And that's the name of the company. So Vyapam Pariksha Mandal Vyapam. So officials at the testing agency, what they're doing, they were charging huge sums of money to guarantee that candidates got either a government job or admission to a state medical college by fixing the results of the exams. So
sounds like something that's going on in our country right now.
I mean,
a little bit.
What's her face? She pleaded guilty too today,
and like 15 others. Yeah,
that shit is so nuts.
I know. Lori Loughlin.
Money. Corrupts people. So these exams, they're super competitive. The likelihood of getting even a low-ranking job is rare. Like these very rare. I've got numbers here. So in 2013, the prestigious pre-medical test, PMT, which determines admission to medical school had 40,086 applicants competing for just 1,659 seats.
What? Oh my God.
It's rough. 450,000 young men and women took the exam to become one of the 7,276 police constables recruited that year. And the police constables don't make a lot. It's a low ranking and a low paying job. I think they only make like maybe $100 a month or something like that. Another 270,000 appeared for the recruitment exam to fill only a little more than 2,000 positions at the lowest rank in the state forest service. So, I don't know. I feel like competitive can definitely be an understatement.
Sure.
So here's a quote from the Guardian article where I got my main source. Quote, standardized testing in India is a heroic and misguided attempt to compensate over 3 short hours for a young lifetime's worth of inequities of caste, class, gender, language, region, and religion, and the crushing inadequacy of the state-run schooling system. It is the only consideration for achieving college admissions or government employment. Nothing else matters. Not your grades over 12 years of school, nor any hobbies, interests, or transformative life experiences, end quote.
Wow.
I know. I couldn't say it any better. I had to quote that.
Yeah.
It's just a whole system. So there is a high demand for these after-school classes. About 25% of all students in India are enrolled in tuition centers, which is an industry worth over $388 million, which I think was like 27 billion Indian rupees, which $388 million. And it depends like where you live. Like in some areas, like 90% of the people are like enrolled in these tuition centers to like eventually take these tests and get a job.
Right.
So, like in America, we have, star athletes and stuff plastered over billboards. In certain places in India, like Madhya Pradesh, star students with high-ranking scores are plastered all over billboards, along highways, outside schools and colleges.
I actually heard about this from one of my professors in college.
Really?
Who's Indian and is apparently a bit of a minor celebrity there as an academic.
Right.
Like as a historian, he's like known in certain parts of
crazy.
India. Yeah, it is. So yeah, I've definitely heard of that being a thing.
Yeah. Some students even travel across the country to these tuition centers to be taught by these celebrity, students, these teachers. So the centers have so this is how they kind of get their names. They have weekly exams, and then they put the results on a bulletin board, which makes it easy for people to see like who the really smart ones are that can be possibly recruited and paid to take tests in the name of someone else.
Oh. Okay.
And then they can see who the weaker students that may require these really super illegal services.
Of course.
So it's been going on since like, I want to say like 2009-ish, but it all started to unravel in 2013 on the morning of one of the medical exams. So police went to Hotel Pathik in Madhya Pradesh, in the Madhya Pradesh's largest city, Indore, to question students. They questioned a young man who claimed to be exam candidate Rishikesh Tyagi. Police asked, they were like, okay, so what's your father's name and date of birth? He was like, I can't, I don't remember.
Well, I could tell you how to do trigonometry extremely well, but my father's name, not sure.
I can tell you so many things, but not that.
All the bones in the body, but not that.
He later revealed his name and said that he came to take the exam in the name of Rishikesh Tyagi.
Sure.
He was paid 50,000 rupees to do it, which is around $720.
Yeah,
so, like, if you're poor and you're smart, it's like the way to go.
Of course.
Right?
I mean, how can you blame? You cannot
for
blame
real.
these kids
and
for doing
it's
that.
part of the why it became
Nor can you really blame the other kids for paying them to.
Right.
I mean, they're all kind of a product of the Kafkaesque system.
That's
right?
why I wanted to like emphasize how it's all very, very corrupt. It's this huge catch-22, you know?
Right.
20 other imposters were arrested that morning. So police were then so they start interviewing people, start digging to the bottom of this. They were led to a man named Jagdish Sagar. So he is a doctor who set up one of many, he's just one, successful businesses that charge up to 200,000 rupees, about $2,900, to get an intelligent but financially needy student to take exams on behalf of applicants who felt that they couldn't pass the test themselves. So this guy got rich, okay?
Yeah.
He had fortunes in land, luxury cars, jewelry. Wow. Apparently, he slept with a mattress stuffed with 1.3 million rupees just to flex. Just to flex.
Just because he could.
Just because. There's tons of these businessmen. Jagdish Sagar was just one of the most prominent. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a very deep-seated in the industry scam, and there's I'm going to be doing a lot of name dropping. So let's talk about a man named Nitin Mohindra. So he was a higher up in the education system who helped make a lot of this happen. So he was definitely one of the corrupt officials who was on the inside and started tampering with stuff. So he joined Vyapam in 1986 as a data entry operator. And so he was promoted and became the principal systems analyst. So he was kind of like a quiet dude, and he didn't draw much attention to himself. And the most attention that he really got was when he showed up in a brand new car, and he started wearing these super nice clothes. So in 2009, police claim Sagar and Mohindra, the businessman doctor and the analyst, had a meeting where Sagar made an unusual proposition. He was like, okay, I'm going to give you the application forms of groups of test takers, and Mohindra is going to go in and alter their roll numbers to ensure that they were seated together so they could cheat from each other. So here's this higher up who looks over the exams. So one of the businessmen, Sagar, was like, here's the people who are paying me. I need you to sit them together. I need you to sit them in the back away from the proctors. Mm-hmm. So according to Mohindra's statement to police, Sagar offered to pay him 25,000 rupees, about $360, for each roll number that he changed.
Wow.
So this is called the engine bogey system. A bright college student, the engine, would take the exam on behalf of a paying customer. So police claim that from 2009 to 2013, Mohindra tampered with at least 737 students taking the state medical exam. And then the scam got even more complicated in 2011 when Pankaj Trivedi, a lecturer at a government college in Indore, so he was appointed as the controller of exams at Vyapam, and he became responsible for ensuring the security of the testing process. But he's in jail now.
Yeah.
He started getting a lot of pressure from so it kind of started when he started getting a lot of pressure from influential people in the government to provide jobs. So people started coming to him as hey, my son really needs a job here, and I'm this bureaucrat, you better help me out. Mm-hmm. Help me get jobs for my friends, my relatives. So here he is. He's just got appointed. He's new to the job. So he goes to Mohindra, who comes up with a plan. He's like, okay, students who had paid to have their results fixed were told to attempt only those questions for which they knew the answers and then leave the rest blank. So at this point, Mohindra got a hold of the computers, and he got all the administrator privileges so he could tamper with the results. All he had to do was start changing answers.
What?
Yeah. So they knew based on the list of names that they had of people who paid, and also people who maybe only answered half the questions, left a lot of them blank. So then Mohindra would talk to the exam observers and be like, hey, under I think it was the Freedom of Information Act, I need the student requested all the answers. I'm gonna need that. And then that's when he would fill out the originals so that they matched the altered version saved on the computer.
Oh, wow.
So one example of this plan in action was found when one student didn't follow the directions. She filled out every answer, many of them incorrect, but investigators found that the officials just used correction fluid to white out the wrong answers and then pencil in the correct ones.
That's okay, honey. We'll take care
of
it.
We got this. We got this. It's just, it's crazy.
You just need to pay us a little bit more.
Just a little tip.
Right.
Tip off the top.
The whiteout tip.
Oh, God. So this is when things get interesting. So police found a spreadsheet on Nitin Mohindra's hard drive that had all the names of
Why do
hundreds
people
of
always
students.
do
And I know
this?
it's like classic, like evil,
Right.
evil
Let me
movie
just tell
trope.
you my plan before
I kill you.
you.
So they find all the names people who had paid to cheat, along with the names of the minister, bureaucrat, or fixer who had referred the student. Right. So the list had a ton of big political names, such as Uma Bharati, a former chief minister, who's a longtime rival of the current minister, Shivraj Singh Chauhan. Remember that name, because he's like the minister of this town, and he's in on this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They actually started calling him, if I get this right, Shivraj is off the like god Shiva or
Shiva, yeah. That's one of the Hindu gods.
And then they started calling him hold on, let me find this really fast. Okay, so like the people who are like out there protesting. So he's named after the Hindu god Shiva. They started calling him Shavraj, or King of the Corpses, because people start showing up dead. I thought it was interesting. So they get this list, and it seems like things are going to clear up pretty quick. They have these names, cool, until the opposition Congress Party shows up, and they're like, and they've been calling for Chauhan's resignation this whole time. They claim that the police task force looking into this tampered with the list and removed the name of the chief minister only to replace those names with the names of his rivals.
God.
So now
Corruption on corruption.
So now we have a she said, he said.
Oh God.
Yeah. So let's talk about the deaths. As this investigation widens, people start dying. Since 2010, and I've got a lot of different stats on this, between 25 and 40 doctors, medical students, policemen, civil servants with link to the scam died in mysterious circumstances. Oh, shit. So the state government, though, insists that this has nothing to do with the scam. These are all of these deaths can be explained. And some of them are plausible and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a lot of mystery here, a lot of theories. So first to Jane Doe, until identified by her father, 19-year-old Namrata Damor was found on the night of January 7, 2012, beside the railroad tracks. So she had been studying medicine at the Mahatma Gandhi Medical College in Indore, one of the bigger cities in the state, before going missing one January morning. So she was found dead, and the post-mortem report described, quote, dried blood present, end quote, in the nostrils, the tongue found clenched between upper and lower jaw, 2 upper teeth missing, lips were bruised, there were scratches on her face, and the post-mortem report classified it as a homicide, most likely by violent asphyxia. So her father, a retired school teacher named Mehtab Singh Damor, demanded an investigation to find whoever killed his daughter. But the police were like, no, they dismissed the findings of the initial postmortem, and they labeled her death a suicide.
What?
They're like, yeah, she jumped off a train. Later, the doctor who prepared the second most postmortem and like marked it as a suicide, he admitted that he didn't examine the body, and he just looked at pictures provided to him by the police. Wow. Yeah, so there were 2 reports, and the like official one was the second one. Mm-hmm. So 38-year-old television reporter Akshay Singh travels to interview Namrata's father, thinking that her death might be linked to this scandal. So he has this interview, and after the interview, he was reportedly waiting outside the Damor house when he started frothing at the mouth. He was taken to the hospital where they tried to revive him, but he later died. His death is still unsolved.
What?
Yeah. So it was his death that people were like, oh shit, something is really happening here, because he was the one who was like, these things are looking fishy. Let me go interview.
God.
Yeah. So by the time of his death in July of 2015, the task force had already arrested 2,235 people in relation to the scandal. 1,860 were released on bail after questioning. Another death, Anuj Ueki, a medical student accused of connecting students with Vyapam officials, died along 2 other friends before being interviewed himself. A truck plowed into their car. Many of the deaths are considered suicides, and some of them they can definitely be considered suicides, and I'll talk about why in a little bit. But some of them you're like, definitely not. So Dr. Ramendra Singh was found hanging from the ceiling fan in his home, January 2015. And then his mother actually died 5 days later. She took her own life by drinking acid. Narendra Tomar, a 29-year-old vet at a government hospital, was arrested for his role as a middleman. He had a sudden heart attack while in jail in June of 2015. He died in the hospital the next day. July 2014, Dr. S.K. Sakal, the dean of a medical college who had actually, he looked into this. He investigated fraudulent admissions, and he was like, you're expelled, you're expelled, you're expelled. And he was found burned to death on the front lawn of his home.
Oh my God.
And police classified his death as a suicide, saying that he doused himself in kerosene and lit himself on fire. But that doesn't make sense for a doctor who already has access to tons of pills.
Right. And it's not like he was trying to, self-immolate to make some sort of political point. Which,
right.
We definitely have seen before. Yeah, that's... Wow.
It's wild.
So clearly the police are in on this. The police are, if not doing these things, then at least, they know who's doing these things.
Right. Someone knows something. Someone's being protected. A year later, his case was actually reopened and looked into again after his colleague, Dr. Arun Sharma, he actually was the one who took over his job after he died. He was found dead in a hotel in Delhi after he was found next to a half-empty bottle of whiskey and antidepressant pills. March of 2015, Shailesh Yadav dies of a suspected brain hemorrhage, and he's the son of the governor of Madhya Pradesh. Him and his father were both implicated in the scam. I could keep going, but I won't.
Right. I mean, you said there were up to 40
Up
of
to
these,
40, right?
Wow.
Wikipedia has a pretty big list too.
Yeah. Thank you, Wikipedia.
Let's talk about the list of people that were found on Mohindra's computer. So, a man named Prashant Pandey, he's a cybersecurity expert who worked with the police on the Vyapam investigation. His story, he's got a good story. So he states for sure that this list that was found on Mohindra's computer was in fact tampered with. So he says that at one point the police needed a certain type of cable in order to connect Mohindra's hard drive. So he gives them the cable, and they're like, okay, well, we want to make sure this actually works. Can we try it on one of your computers? And he says, sure. And because he works for cybersecurity, his computer automatically makes a mirror image of what was on Mohindra's hard drive.
Mm-hmm.
A few months later, his relationship with the investigation sours after he was arrested and put in jail for trying to sell confidential phone records. What also happened was that the wife of Chauhan was found, she was had phone records where she was in contact with Mohindra and some other people who were have already been arrested with the scam. So it didn't look good for her or the chief minister.
Mm-hmm.
So it was then he decided to fight back. He was like, okay, I'm going to expose this. I'm going to expose these corrupt officials. Quote, I realized that I had a mirror image of Nitin Mohindra's hard drive, and on comparing the Excel sheet submitted by the police in court and the Excel sheet from my copy of Mohindra's hard drive, I realized that the police had doctored the evidence to save the chief minister. End
wow.
quote. So this information, he gives it to his lawyer. The lawyer leaks it to the public. as this investigation goes on, oh crap, my computer. Okay. So as this investigation goes on, the state sends the file to a government forensic lab. So this is the state. They're like, all right, we're going to send this in. And that forensic lab was like, yeah, this is real. This is the real one. This file was not tampered with. Pandy's lawyers did the same thing. They sent it to a different forensic lab, a private forensic lab. And they also certify that the file that he has is not tampered with. So again, we have this he said, she said,
So let me understand that. So
yes.
The place where they sent it to, the government sent it to, said that Pandy's...
No.
Okay.
The state's allegedly doctored, tampered evidence file, they send that to a lab. And the lab said that this is real, this has not been tampered with. And then Pandy's lawyers... They
sent it to a lab as well.
Took Pandy's mirrored image
and they said
file
that one
and sent that one to a different lab. And they were like, this has not been doctored.
Okay.
So...
Right. So one of them obviously isn't telling the truth.
Right. And I mean, this is basically the entire scandal. He said, she said.
Yeah.
The government claims one thing, and then the people, the families, these private investigators say something else. So the basic questions we have here are, why are these people being killed? Specifically, Namrata Damor, the girl who was found on the railroad tracks, her father insists that she was not a part of this scam. But then again, like, what parent would want to say that about their child? Sure. Furthermore, one student named Gaurav Patni talks to a reporter claiming that, I don't know what the press laws are like in India. I don't know if this is legal or not. But he talks to a reporter. The reporter had the camera on, but Gaurav Patni assumed that it was off. Mm-hmm. So he claims that he used to be in the business of fixing exams, but it was getting harder and harder to get information and collect payments as this investigation goes wide open. Quote, last year, we got only 2 students through. I'll even tell you the names. One is a girl from Indore, Namrata Damor. You can ask around. They haven't even paid yet.
Wow.
So was she killed because she did not or could not pay?
Yeah, that's a possibility.
One police officer whose son was accused in the scam, he says that the Vyapam task force falsely named suspects who were already dead in order to protect the real culprits. Another theory, some people say that it's impossible to tell this is what I think. I think it's impossible to tell if the deaths are really connected to the scandal because the families refuse to admit that their children paid money to cheat on exams. No one wants, it's taboo. No one wants to talk about it. And it's plausible that some of the deaths actually were suicides. So when you look at the students who were accused of cheating, who were implicated in this scam, their lives were totally ruined, whether they did it or not. They lost their jobs. They were put into prison. And it's a huge personal expense. Like, if you're innocent, it'll take years to clear your name. So it's this catch-22. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. Like, if you're poor, the only way to get a job is to get these rich politicians to help you to get in. But then you're caught and you're arrested. So the Central Bureau investigation takes over the case in July of 2015. And then since then, the mysterious deaths seem to disappear until about a week later, the driver of a train spotted a corpse on the tracks. The body was identified as Vijay Bahadur, and he is a retired Madhya Pradesh bureaucrat, and he was an observer of some of the exams. His wife says that he had stepped out of their train compartment for a sec and into the corridor to shut the door to their carriage, and he never came back. The CBI, Central Bureau of Investigation, has now added Bahadur to the list of suspected Vyapam-related fatalities and begun an investigation into his death.
Oh,
and that is the Vyapam scandal.
Yeah. Crazy.
Crazy. And my main source was a little bit of Wikipedia and a Guardian article called The Mystery of India's Deadly Exam Scam by Aman Sethi.
Okay.
A good one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
A good one.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a guy named Clarence Edward Smith, also known as Clarence 13X, also known as Allah the Father.
Oh, wow.
And Allah was a spiritual, cultural, and religious leader, although he wouldn't consider himself a religious leader, in the 1950s and 60s in New York City. He eventually led a fairly small but pretty influential group that came to be known as the 5%ers, or the 5% Nation, or the Nation of Gods and Earths.
Okay.
Which you thought kind of sounded kind of weird.
Well, it could be like a band name.
Right. No, that could definitely be a band name. So Clarence 13X spent some of his formative years serving in the U.S. Army in the Korean War. And when he returned home to New York, he found out that his wife had joined a then fairly new religious movement called the Nation of Islam. And I think we've all kind of heard of the Nation of Islam, right? Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and so forth and so on. So this group, the Nation of Islam, was sort of an offshoot of the global Islamic faith. Didn't adhere to all the same tenets, but definitely some of them, a lot of them. And the Nation of Islam adherents, for example, believed that the founder of Nation of Islam, Wallace Fard Muhammad, was an incarnation of God in person. That he essentially was God on Earth, a kind of deistic being of some kind. And Wallace Fard Muhammad's kind of an interesting guy in and of himself. Apparently he came to America to like Detroit, I think, or something, and he was like a businessman, and he just started like preaching this like offshoot of Islam and got all these, but we don't know like too much about him. But anyway, or I don't know. I don't know too much about him anyway. So Clarence 13X really took to the Nation of Islam, though. Once he joined it, he was really like invested in it. He became a leader, a student instructor. So he was teaching other students, especially in karate, which he had gotten really good at in the army. Yeah. So he was really, physically able, physically adept, but he was also very mentally adept. Really good speaker, very, very, personable. And, he just really kind of hit it off. But he didn't jibe with the Nation of Islam in every respect. Clarence 13X, he was a kind of a party guy, a little bit.
Okay.
He was a little bit of a party guy. He loved to gamble.
Welcome to the 60s.
Right. And he didn't stop gambling or doing some other things while he was a member of the Nation of Islam. So,
is that against...
very, very much against the rules. They adhered to those rules very strictly in terms of like the prohibitions on, extramarital sex, dancing, any number of things, smoking, drinking, all the gambling, all that kind of stuff. All the fun stuff. They don't like the fun stuff. I don't know. It works for them, maybe. I'm not sure. So what Clarence 13X also didn't believe in, which was really important, was that he didn't believe that Wallace Fard Muhammad was divine.
Oh.
And he didn't believe this sort of... so apparently in Nation of Islam, there's like this whole thing that Allah is like a black man, right? Or black or something.
Yes.
That's like a part of the religion. Wallace Fard Muhammad was like not really black. Like, obviously, that's like not a real thing anyway, right? What does it mean to be black? But to Clarence, this was very, very important. The fact that Wallace Fard Muhammad was a light-skinned person meant to him that he could not be God.
Colorism.
Clarence 13X was very, very much a colorist. So this, kind of rubbed him the wrong way.
Come on, y'all, we gotta stick together.
Right. and also all the other people as well. So, yeah, he kind of had some issues with Nation of Islam, and he was, though, initiated and did teach for a time at Mosque Number 7, which was the same mosque that was led by Malcolm X for a time.
Oh, okay.
At that particular time, actually. However, Clarence left Nation of Islam fairly quickly, in 1963. So he, like I said, he kind of, had some non-standard beliefs that didn't kind of match with Nation of Islam. He also didn't want to adhere to the strict rules. So, for whatever reason, we don't really know, but he broke with Nation of Islam. And like I said, he was a very, naturally charismatic figure. Like, this was a guy who was gonna attract a group of people to him. When he entered a room, people noticed. When he talked, people listened, right?
He had this great aura.
Yeah, he was just one of those people.
Yeah.
So he quickly started gathering some adherents, mainly from the old, NOI members, to his new faith, which didn't really have a name at the time. So these new members were complemented by a number of New York street youths who would hang out on the streets and to whom he would preach. This was the story of what became known as the 5 Percenters. They would go out in the streets and preach, and that was they didn't have a church; they had the streets.
So that was originally the name that they came up with?
That's
5 Percenters?
That's the name that they ended up with, yes. So Clarence 13X preached that all black men are Allah. That all black men, only black, and definitely only men. Women in this theology are not divine. They are earths, complementary to, but subservient to men, and distinct from men.
Did he have a definition of what he thought black was?
Not really. It's a little bit fuzzy, and his whole sort of like racist ideas, they're not super well defined apparently, and they may have sort of changed over his life, over his short life. But he definitely, to him, being black was very important. Mm-hmm. Now, he had white followers. Mm-hmm. There were white prominent members of the church. So it's not like it was like only for black people, but it did teach that all black men are Allah and all black women are earths. So anyway, he sort of rejected this notion of a sort of like invisible, superintending, omnipotent God of the kind that we find in, Islam and Christianity and Judaism and many other religions. He didn't think that. He didn't have that conception of God. God to him was not anything that ethereal, right? God to Clarence 13X was a physical being. In fact, every black man was God. Literally God on Earth. I kind of see where
he's coming from.
Yeah, it's not an incoherent set of beliefs. If you took black men to change that to all people, I think it's a pretty great belief. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's better than most, for sure. So Clarence 13X, like I said, he held, pretty racist views against white people for the most part. Although he did eventually have a really good, productive working relationship with a number of white government officials in New York City at the time. And a large part of this new faith, the 5 Percenters, was also numerology. Obscurantism, mysticism.
I love that shit.
Surrounding letters and numbers. So, we see this in some forms of, for example, like Kabbalistic Judaism, like mystical Judaism, where how in Hebrew numbers and letters are the same, right?
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
Or at least there are letters that stand for numbers. At least I don't know too much about it, but anyway. What Clarence 13X thought was that every letter and every number has a hidden meaning, and that you can use those to kind of extract like this hidden knowledge, right? This gnosis. This is a recurrent theme in mystical religions. He didn't come up with this out of whole cloth, obviously. It has elements of different mystical faiths, but it's pretty interesting, and there's like a shit ton more to do with that, obviously, that I'm like not going to talk about because it's like gets into like a bunch of other shit.
That could definitely.
But, like,
for a second, I was like, "All right, let's get into that." Like,
yeah.
sidebar.
And it's called, I think it's something like Supreme Mathematics or something. I forget.
I'll take that class.
But yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. The name, right, 5%ers. So let's talk about where that comes from. So there's a Nation of Islam teaching that 85% of people are the mesmerized masses, kept in subjugation by the evil 10%, right? So 85 plus 10, that's 95%. The remaining 5% are the people who, sort of Cassandra-like, right, are telling everyone, like, this is what's really going on. You're being duped. You're being held in sway by this evil 10%, but they don't listen to them. And this is the 5% that Clarence 13X claimed to be the leader of.
And I know we talked about this a little bit. You said it's not a cult.
No. I would not at all consider it to be a cult.
Okay, but this kind of like, we're the ones we're woke and we really know what's happening. That's definitely kind of like...
Sure, I mean, that's an aspect of cults, but that's an aspect of a lot of groups.
Of religion in general,
religion
too.
being one of them, of course, but a lot of other groups as well.
For sure.
People claiming to have special knowledge
really
and being part of a, like, really knowing what's going on group. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's sort of almost ubiquitous in our culture nowadays. Every tweeter kind of has that notion, I think, almost.
Oh my God,
myself included.
Mario, you have no idea how on par that is.
Right.
It's too accurate.
So, according to Allah, the father, Clarence, he mainly came to be called Allah from sort of a certain point on. He, like I said, did not consider the 5% nation to be a religion per se. He preferred to see it as a cultural movement, as a way of life. In some ways, this reminds me of the way people talk about Buddhism, to where, you can be a Buddhist but also be a Christian, or you can be a Buddhist and be an atheist.
It's more of a way of life.
It doesn't have, like, a superintending theistic or a set of, like, rules you have to follow. It's more of a way of life, a way of thinking, a sort of cultural phenomenon, if you will. So in this vein, Allah, Clarence, didn't prohibit indulgences in any number of different vices, right? They didn't adhere to those strict codes of, conduct that you had to have as a member of Islam or Nation of Islam. So there was no dress code. There were no behavioral guidelines. He actually focused really heavily on reformation of formerly incarcerated people. Which is a great movement, and teaching young black people self-worth, self-reliance.
Yes.
Based on a theory of, like I said, black racial superiority.
That's super important.
Yeah, no, like I said, some of his ideas are, like, really great ideas.
Yeah.
Like, if it weren't mixed with the racism, it's like, yes. Like, learning, self-reliance, like, a sense of self-worth for black people, like, of course, for every person, but yeah.
I feel like that's a common theme with so many groups and religions, like, their core beliefs are super important and, like, definitely well-intentioned and something that needs to be put out in the world, but then there's something else.
Exactly. So one of these other kind of extraneous things about Clarence 13X that we kind of need to get into is that in addition to his ministry, he was also involved in the communist movement in America, specifically the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, the FPCC. So one of my main sources, really interesting source. I'd suggest reading it, although it's kind of dense. One of my main sources was an academic analysis. This was the one where I was telling you it's taking me forever to read this thing.
Yeah.
Was an academic analysis of the FBI files on Clarence Smith.
Oh.
The FBI. How did they see him? Right. Yeah.
That would be dense.
Right. So the FBI, they saw Clarence not as a god, obviously, not as a spiritual leader, not as an underground cultural icon, which is probably what he would have preferred to consider himself as. They saw him as a leader of a loosely affiliated group of New York street gangs. Now, obviously that's not true, but it's also not completely off base because, like I said, part of his ministry, part of the whole idea of the 5% Nation was that you minister to people who are on the street, who are in prison, who probably have done some bad shit in their lives.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's kind of the whole point of why you're talking to them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely a misconception, but you can see kind of from where that misconception was coming. So, you know, obviously FBI, especially at this time, not a great organization for a lot of reasons. Also a great organization for a lot of reasons as time goes on, but it's a mixed bag.
Also a great episode. Oh no, we talked about the CIA, not the FBI, right?
Right. I talked about the CIA.
I like to look back at that episode a lot. It's just
2 episodes.
It's just good.
Yeah. So, yeah, the FBI, they sort of utilized the intelligence resources of what was then known as the New York City Police Department Bureau of Special Services. This was essentially the undercover officers and informants. And these informants began to turn up talking about this new group, the 5%ers, right? Who the fuck is this, right? The 5%ers. They never heard of them. So the NYCPD and FBI concluded that Clarence and the group were simply a loosely formed group of street thugs and wrote them off for the most part. There are indications, however, that they did see Clarence as a sort of threat, right? Especially Hoover himself. And that they may have orchestrated, the FBI may have orchestrated the arrest and subsequent committal to an insane asylum of Clarence 13X. But it's not totally clear. So let's kind of talk about it. So there was this kind of incident, right, where a number of NOI members and Clarence 13X included were visiting Mosque Number 7, which had been closed subsequent to Malcolm X's death. So this is May 1965 we're talking about here. So they're there. The police see them there. It's a closed building. They tell them to leave. The NOI members reportedly start vandalizing buildings, blocking traffic, making a big fuss. This led to a number of arrests, including of Clarence 13X. The 5%ers were a very vocal presence at all of his proceedings, including yelling peace over and over and over again, which that's one of their big... Actually, some people think they may have introduced that as a cultural thing, saying peace to each other, like saying, hey, peace. That actually may have come from the 5%ers. It's not totally clear. But this was like one of their big things, was saying peace, because they were all about peace. And they did that at his arraignment. And at that proceeding, at the arraignment, Clarence 13X proclaimed that as he was Allah, the city does not have any jurisdiction over him, and in fact would incur grave consequences if they were to prosecute him. Which, of course, did not come to pass, but, you know.
I kind of want to be there.
I know, right?
Just to see.
He was eventually sent to Bellevue Hospital for psychiatric examination. He kept up his ministry while in psychiatric incarceration and even converted some of his fellow patients.
What were his charges? What did he...
I'm not sure exactly what the charges were, but I'm assuming... Like the other members, he was probably charged with, you know, vandalism, destruction of property, resisting arrest,
so
things
he was
of
sent
that
to a
nature.
psychiatric hospital? Question mark?
Because he claimed to be God. Like they misconceived that.
They played that.
Or they intentionally misconceived it. It depending on what you think actually happened here and who was talking to who and who orchestrated what. And how powerful and involved Mr. Hoover was. That's the real question. So some of the 5%ers thought that the psychiatric evaluation was held up and that he was simply, you know, held for a long time, you know, because of the FBI, essentially. And in November of 1965, he was eventually, though, committed to Mattawan State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. He was diagnosed with schizophrenic reaction, paranoid type, with delusions of grandeur, and committed indefinitely. And he would have remained committed indefinitely, but fate did intervene in the shape of the Supreme Court of the United States, which ruled in 1966 that there had to be confinement limits placed on involuntary custody without trial. Therefore, many people, including Clarence 13X, were released. And in March of 1967, Clarence 13X resumed his street ministry and his work to prevent and stop violence on the streets of New York City. No mean feat. in, mid-60s New York City. I mean, he yeah, like I said before, he kind of professed these really racist views, right, against white people. But as part of his ministry, he also worked closely with the mayor of New York City, John Lindsay, at the time, who commemorated Clarence after his death, and was also instrumental in securing a night school for the Five Percenters. He and other Five Percenters, Clarence 13X rather, and other Five Percenters even went with John Lindsay to the streets of Harlem the day that Martin Luther King died, in April 1968, to prevent a possible riot and just to express condolences.
Yeah.
So that's like the sort of clout that the Five Percenters had in the neighborhood, and the connection and clout that they had with John Lindsay. So it's interesting that they were able to sort of bridge these divides within the city. So Clarence 13X and the 5% Nation, whatever the FBI may have made of them, were actually, in reality, committed to nonviolence, committed to peace and learning and enlightenment, despite many of their checkered pasts. And even maybe while they were in the group, you know, it's these weren't perfect people, right? But again, that's the whole point,
right?
But the philosophy was pretty pure, other than the racism, for the most part. So, despite their peacenik ways, Clarence 13X and the Five Percenters did have a pretty strong premonition that Clarence 13X would be assassinated.
I mean,
Martin Luther King had been assassinated. John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. Malcolm X had been assassinated.
Yeah.
I don't think Bobby Kennedy had been killed yet. I'm not totally sure. But yeah, it seemed like he was gonna it was gonna be him too. So on June 12th, 1969, Clarence 13X left his night school after giving instruction and hanging out for a little bit at about 2 or 3 a.m. As was his wont, he went and gambled for a couple hours, and then he was on his way to the apartment of his wife, Dora Smith. They lived apart at the time. While he was standing in the lobby, he was ambushed by 3 unknown assailants and shot dead on the scene.
Oh my God.
Those 3 have never been identified at all. There does not seem to have been much of a investigation that was done at all.
Do we know why? Or
Not
maybe
totally sure.
I mean, there's probably a lot of. There's so much to it.
I think it was sort of written off at the time as part of this, sort of like street war kind of thing. It wasn't taken as seriously, I don't think, as it should have been. So many suspects emerged, though. So let's talk about some of these suspects.
Yeah.
So the FBI, obviously, right? So they did have extensive files on Clarence 13X and the Five Percenters, and Hoover definitely would have preferred if 13X weren't, Clarence 13X weren't around. Probably, though, they probably thought, the FBI probably thought that his death would cause the destruction of the 5% Nation. Not what ended up happening, by the way. We'll talk about it at the end. So, there's very little evidence connecting the FBI to this crime. Even in the declassified files, there's not really much of anything. So, Nation of Islam and/or Louis Farrakhan, who is a prominent, leader in the Nation of Islam and a much maligned figure in many circles in America. This theory was proposed by some in the media, including the Daily News, which painted it as part of a quote-unquote Muslim war that was supposedly going on at the time. Nation of Islam definitely didn't like what Clarence 13X was doing. They didn't appreciate him taking their followers and possible converts.
Okay.
They weren't a large number of people, the 5% Nation, but sort of definitionally, right? But they definitely had a cultural salience. And it's not like the NOI had an infinite number of people from whom to draw either, right? They're kind of pulling from the same pool of people.
Right.
So the NOI has been accused in other killings as well, including, of course, in the death of Malcolm X. That's a popular theory of his assassination. So for his part, Louis Farrakhan, though, says that he had no role in the death, and even said that he and Clarence had a good working relationship. It wouldn't have been wouldn't even have made sense, he claims. So the NYPD thought that it was connected to an extortion ring, that the Clarence 13X's assassination was connected to an extortion ring run by some members of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. So they essentially thought that this had something to do with the communists. And this is fairly implausible since the committee had disbanded a few years earlier, and I just didn't really hear about any evidence that pointed to that. I'm not really sure if they may have had something, but I don't know.
What's an extortion committee?
Extortion ring.
What's an extortion ring?
Sure. So an extortion ring, extortion is me asking you for something in a...
it's like kind of like blackmail?
Exactly. Blackmail is a form of extortion. Or if I say like, hey, give me $5 or I'm going to punch you in the arm. That's also extortion.
Rude.
Can be as simple as that. It's whatever. Give me your lunch money, right? Kid. That's extortion. So anyway, only one arrest was ever made in August of 1969, but that suspect was quickly released. And, others have proposed that maybe it could have been the CIA, maybe it could have been a disgruntled 5% member. Who knows, right? It's very, very mysterious. So, like I said, it doesn't really seem like an investigation was properly done. And also, Clarence 13X was pretty cryptic. Not a lot necessarily is known about what issues he may have been having with people, or he didn't keep a diary. He didn't have, confidants per se that I heard about. So we don't know what the motive may necessarily have been. Maybe it was something that we wouldn't know about that has nothing to do with any of this stuff. Who knows? I don't know. Do you know?
No.
Are you aware?
No.
I'm not sure.
I mean, I didn't realize there were so many questions surrounding this.
So many questions. So, like I said, though, his movement, the 5% Nation, the Nation of Gods and Earths, does live on, actually. Yeah. It's actually grown. It has at least thousands of members today.
Wow.
Maybe tens of thousands. No one really knows because it's not well documented. But they are in many, many states. I think it's like upwards of 20 states. And several countries as well. I can't remember exactly, but I think basically the English-speaking countries, Canada, Australia, America, that sort of stuff. What's really interesting, though, and you can look more into this, the 5% Nation definitely had an outsized influence on black culture, especially in the 80s and 90s. A number of their ideologies and slogans and things have ended up in rap, in rap songs. Is that a thing? Rap songs? It sounds right.
Music?
It hits the ear wrong. Rap music? I don't know. Music? Makes me sound like a weird
song?
Old white
rap
person.
Music?
In the rap songs, when they're singing them rap song. Anyway, a number of rappers, including members of Wu-Tang Clan, Busta Rhymes, and Brand Nubian,
Busta Rhymes,
are, if not actual 5%ers, at least, admirers of Clarence 13X.
I could see Busta Rhymes being...
Oh, yeah. No, and apparently a lot of the Wu-Tang Clan. So we are running out of time, so we better wrap up.
We're gonna wrap it up.
That's a wrap, y'all.
Wrap
thank you
up.
so much for listening, you guys.
Thank you for listening. If you...
You've been still putting us stuff up on our Instagram, right?
Yes,
Instagram.
Always. Follow us on Instagram.
My tweeter is Mario Tex 30. If you want to tweet me.
Is it because you're from Texas?
That's true.
Did you guys know?
Also, Stephen Curry, so...
Oh, God.
The two things I am most known for. Texas and having that Stephen Curry.
Go Duke!
Fuck you. So...
I was sad when they lost.
Go to our Patreon, and thanks for listening, you guys.